Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce myself. My name is Tia Diran, and I will be the master of ceremony for this session. We are opening today's session with the big theme, navigating payment system to unlock the potential of digital economy in the era of continuous disruption. Fintech 360-degree, 6 feet apart, global pandemic, and the rise of low-touch economy. This session will be moderated by the co-founder and deputy CEO of Kredivo, Bapak Umang Rustagi. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our moderator, Bapak Umang Rustagi.
And I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kredivo, and I will be the moderator of the session today. So I would like to start everyone by welcoming everyone. So good afternoon, everyone. I think today we are actually gathered here to actually discuss a very apt topic in the era of social distancing, which is 6 feet apart, global pandemic, and the rise of low-touch economy. Now, this topic is very important because in the last few months after the COVID-19 outbreak has hit, the entire society has undergone a massive change, right? The way the people live and even how businesses are operating. So as a society, it's truly impressive about how we have actually evolved in this new world order. But as the entire user behavior have shifted, this actually brings up a lot of new changes in the society. So during this entire period where we are seeing massive changes and transformation, I think it's natural that this period will actually create a lot of chaos as well as a lot of opportunity. So in this environment, actually, the whole low-touch economy will become very important, right? Because as we are now impacted by pandemic, there is minimum face-to-face interaction with the customer, and the businesses will actually need to learn about how to operate in this new world order. So in this backdrop, I would actually like to introduce our panelists today. So we have actually three panelists. Unfortunately, one of the panelists, Mr. Iskandar, will not be able to join us. So I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Mr. William DeVos. Mr. William is actually the principal and founder for Board of Innovation. Mr. William, nice to be, thank you for joining us on the panel today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Our second panelist is actually a veteran of Bank Indonesia, Pa Erwin Haryono, who is actually serving as the Executive Director of Payment System Policy Department at Bank of Indonesia. Pa Erwin, please welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Pa Umang. Hi, everyone.
And then our final panelist today is Mr. Sani Ismail. So Mr. Sani is actually the principal financial service specialist for Asian Development Bank. Mr. Sani, please welcome to the panel as well.
Thank you, Umang. Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Great. And just as we are getting started on the panel, I'll also request that we will, from our audience, that we will have a Q&A feature at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please add that to the chat and we can take some of them at the end of the session. So as we start the panel, I think my first question is to actually Pa Erwin. Now, Pa Erwin, obviously, Bank Indonesia has been pushing the digital payment adoption for a long time, and it's also published the payment system blueprint last year. So would you like to share us the vision of the BSPI 2025, which is on how businesses can navigate the national payment system, especially as they are accelerating digital adoption in the pandemic era? Pa Erwin.
Thank you, Pak Umang. Thank you for moderating this session. I think this is a very important part of national discussion about digital transformation for Indonesian economy. I think today we are so lucky to have all the prominent speakers from starting from the president himself to all the authorities in the financial sectors coming in one stage, and they really set the tone for the digital transformation, which is really important for Indonesia. Um, that being said, I think we are lucky in Bank Indonesia that we already established our digital payment transformation since last year. So Pak Umang and everyone, I think most of us already know that last year we introduced our blueprint for financial payment. For payment system of Indonesia 2025. So what we are trying to achieve is really using the digitalization of payment for boosting up the digital transformation for Indonesia. So let me concentrate on that issue. So we have right now 5 working group really working hard in making the payment in Indonesia becoming digital, and then from that we would like to see how we can use the data and so on and so forth. So in this slide here, we have a very nice 5 working group on the right hand side. So I think Pak Umang, I will try to concentrate on that issue, trying to follow up what has been said this morning by the governor on how serious we are in transforming the digital payment for Indonesian economy. So on the working group number 1, we are trying hard to introduce the idea of open banking by standardizing what we call API, application programming interface. So that's really a nice tool for financial institution, bank and non-bank to collaborate. So using this API, both bank and non-bank can really transfer the data and then do the collaboration. We are now having seeing the application of the API, but it's not really in the numbers that we would like to see. So by introducing the standardization of the open API, we really hope those collaboration between bank and non-bank using the API will be seen in the near future. So right now, this initiative has been almost at the end. So at the end of this year, we will introduce the standardization to the industry, and then from that they can use those standardization in doing the collaboration. That's a very important part of this digital transformation, both for bank and non-bank. So the second working group will really concentrate on the digitalization of retail payment. This morning, Governor of Bank Indonesia introduced the QRIS, which is the QR payment standardized by the industry and the authority. So now we have 5.2 million merchants in the system. So we introduced this QRIS last year. So on the 1 year, we have 5.2 million merchants. So this is really important part of the journey. So in the working group number 2, we will also modernize, digitalize the other infrastructure, which is the what we call BFAS, Bank Indonesia Fast Payment. If you can go to the previous slide. So in the working group number 2, we'll also digitalize the payment, and as well as we would like to have some kind of UPI that has been established in India. So altogether, the working group number 2 will really digitalize the payment. Working group number 3 will concentrate on the large value payment system and all those FMIs, financial market infrastructures, becoming the internationally standardized FMI. Working group number 4 will concentrate on the data. So by having all those infrastructure in place, we can have all the data, the granular data. So hopefully by having this working group number 4, we will introduce the public infrastructure of data. That's very important in our journey of digital transformation. And lastly, working group number 5, we will concentrate on the legal reformation of the payment system regulation. So all together, those Pak Umang, all together, working group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is now being done. So hopefully in the near future, the end of this year, as well as the early next year, we'll introduce some of those results. So by having all those digital payment in place, that will be a very good pillar for the journey of Indonesian transformation. So when we talk about this issue, which is the low touch economy, that's very important. So basically we have introduced our digital payment. So when we have this COVID in place, so we are so lucky we have those digital platform in place. So I cannot imagine without all those digital infrastructure in place. Probably Indonesian economic growth will be have a negative numbers even further. So now we can see all those digital activities in the commerce and payment, lending, and so on and so forth. So Pak Umang, we are so lucky having this in place. So in our preparation to the low touch economy, I think we are in the good place to start. I will stop here, Pak Umang.
Okay. Thank you, Erwin, for sharing the vision for Bank Indonesia. And I think obviously the 5 working groups are very critical. I think if we just look at open banking, digitizing retail payments, as well as data privacy, and also in terms of enabling large value payment system, I think this is a very forward-looking vision, and I think we can already starting to see the impact of this vision from BI, where we are actually seeing financial literacy of people actually increasing, the payment efficiency and the adoption of digital payment actually increasing. So thanks for sharing the vision, and I think we will definitely see a lot of big changes in the future. For example, QIS adoption and other changes. So thank you for Erwin for sharing that vision. So our second question is actually to basically Mr. William, right? Because I think as in terms of working with large corporates and helping them basically navigate through this low touch economy, Mr. William, what's your opinion in terms of how businesses can actually navigate this low touch economy, and what's the current state of that?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I'm waiting for a sec till my slides come up. So I'm William de Vos. I'm the principal of Board of Innovation here in Singapore. We work for a lot of numerous large corporates in helping them figure out their innovation strategy, as well as business design, where we co-create new products and services. Would it be possible to open the slides as well? Lovely. You can directly skip to the next slide. This is just the introduction. So I heard the term low touch economy here a couple of times. What is it exactly? The slides are quite unclear, so I'll read them out loud as well. The low touch economy is actually categorized by anything that has low touch interactions due to the COVID crisis we're all in. The worldwide lockdowns have forced all consumers as well as companies to adapt to this new way of working, mainly due to new habits. It's a term we coined last March, and since then we had a lot of traction on the term, so we were very, very happy. If we can go to the next slide, please. I hope everybody can read it, otherwise, no. So what is actually the low touch economy? It started from a health crisis, and then of course it mutilated a little bit into a economic crisis, as well as for some a food crisis, a housing crisis, a political crisis. So it touched upon many, many large things. So on the top left, you see the health measures that started, the low touch measures to fight the current and future crises like COVID-19. That gave way to social distancing restrictions, which created a lot of new behavioral shifts, the way people change how they interact with each other as well as with businesses. This led, of course, to a lot of technological advances. One of them will be touchless payments, of course, it will be accelerated. Some of these trends are accelerated by COVID-19 and the behavioral shifts. Some of them are completely new. So they're incubated from the ground up due to COVID-19. And of course, these three, the health measures and then behavioral shifts, bottom left, as well as the technological advances, like we all know, and we're sitting in one of those marvels at the moment, Zoom. Those three things coincide with, of course, the economic disruption to mitigate the impact of the crisis, both at a macro as well as a micro level. And all these are playing simultaneously. So the economic disruption creates new health measures, creates new technological advances. New technological advances will create that economic disruption for, in this case, maybe where we a year ago would all use Skype. Right now we're on Zoom. So on a micro level for Microsoft, that is an economic disruption. If you could go to the next slide. So these shifts are happening actually on many fronts we've seen with the corporates we work for. It's not only within that company itself, but it's also on the macroeconomic level, the limited access to capital, or in some other countries, thanks to subsidies and other payments by the government, a larger influx of cash into certain areas of the economy. We've seen new regulation come up, like new privacy laws. Technology has changed industry dynamics, of course, like the supply chain disruptions, as well as the human behavior. And we also like to force the fact that the human behavior is often at the cause of this. If the human behavior doesn't change, it doesn't give that technological advance, which doesn't change the regulation, etc., etc. If we could go to the last slide. And here we've seen it's a little bit of a framework where we categorize those shifts into four major patterns, where we have those where the effect is often very temporary. Once there is, for example, a vaccine or something else that changes, it creates a short-term boost. In this case, mouses for laptops. When everybody started working from home, it got a really big spike because everybody needed that same laptop equipment to work at home, of course. So that was a very high demand. On the bottom left, you see the short-term drops. In this case, for example, eyelash extensions, in the sense that less people were going out and going to a party or visiting family and friends. So making yourself beautiful was less of a priority. But again, once that vaccine is there, or once those shifts stop, it will only be a short-term drop. Where we focus oftentimes is on the top right corner, where the demand is high, and it will be a lasting effect. We often talk about the stickiness of certain of those things. Is if the COVID situation changes, how much will we revert back to the old normal, or how much will stick around just because for the people, the behavior has stuck, it is practical, it is handy, or it just the new way of working. So one of those lasting effects of, for example, is blue light glasses. A lot of people start buying blue light glasses because they were behind their computer the entire day. And then on the bottom right, you see those long-term burns where, unfortunately, the low demand of something will have a lasting effect as well. In this case, it's an example of bowling. Even if there is a vaccine, bowling with a lot of touching of the same balls and being in close proximity together, we predict that it will a lasting effect on the low demand there. So this is a little bit how we categorize the low touch economy. And if you ask my personal opinion, I see, especially here in APAC, that a lot of companies are going in the right way. One thing I would love to see a little bit more is, which is of course logical, the first 6 months of the crisis, a lot of companies have focused on defense, making sure their cash reserves were high, making sure that what needs to be done got done. But I think it's time, especially with some good news around certain vaccines on the horizon and some good data there, that we go on the offense and really look towards what behaviors will stick in the long run, not only 6 months from now, but 3 to 5 to 10 years from now, where our major bets should be. So thank you. I hope there's a couple more questions coming, but I don't want to take up too much time. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. William, for the insightful session. And I think we are also seeing very similar shifts in user behavior in Southeast Asia, right? I think in a recently released report from Google Temasek and Bain, there are about 1 in 3 customers who are actually coming to digital for the first time. And the report is actually predicting that 90% of the user behavior will stick even after the pandemic. And at Kredivo, where we actually sit across most of the e-commerce purchases in Indonesia, we are also seeing the user behavior actually shift more and more towards online, towards e-commerce, and even the user buying behavior is shifting. So thank you for the insightful session on that.
One thing, if I may add,
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, one thing I want to add there is that it's very important that we've seen that data that it used to for a technology adoption, it used to take until 2 years ago between 3 to 5 years for technology to be adopted. And we've seen that shrink down to 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
So the faster you go to market, the most important it's going to be in the long run.
Great. Yeah, no, I think we are also seeing something very similar in Indonesia as well. So I think my final question will be to Mr. Sani Ismail, right, to just share the regional perspective from where he fits with Asian Development Bank, that how our countries and all the stakeholders are actually fostering innovation and transforming in order to basically recover and accelerate from this, accelerate their growth during the pandemic time.
Thank you, Pak Umang. Very good to be on this session. And can I just request assistance with the presentation to put it up on the screen, and then I can just go straight to some of the examples, regional examples. All right, can we go to slide number 3, I think. Just maybe if I can start, to also sort of continue the train of thought that William was sharing with us just now. So we know already the impact of the pandemic on the economy. In terms of Southeast Asia, we're looking at contraction of 3.8%. Indonesia, I think ADB's latest projection as of September is that the 2020 figures will be looking at contraction, 1% contraction. So we understand the impact on the economy side, but as William rightly pointed out, if there is a silver lining to this pandemic, it is the acceleration of digital innovation and fintech. So you see in the blue circle on the right, the number of consumers in Southeast Asia, million digital consumers by the end of the year, 310 million. And that was a number that was originally forecasted for 2025, but we're already seeing those numbers being hit, which means that we are advancing penetration as well as usage of digital financial services, digital consumers 4 years ahead of the original projection. Can we go to the next slide? Just like to share some statistics on this area. So if you look at this particular slide, you see, this was actually a survey that was done jointly by University of Cambridge, Alternative Finance, as well as World Bank. And it shows very interestingly, when they did the survey with respondents, mainly regulators, you see that there's been increase in the usage of financial services, digital payment and remittance by 24%, digital banks, 22%, digital payment, 65% for payment and remittance, 24% for digital banks, and 22% for savings and deposits. So that's kind of the increase we're seeing based on what regulators are telling us in terms of the use of financial services during this pandemic. Next slide, please. So in this particular slide, you see essentially how regulators themselves have responded during this pandemic. Again, you see sort of respondents, informing the same survey done by Cambridge and World Bank on measures, regulatory measures taken, including KYC, know your customer, digital identity, economic relief, as well as business continuity. So you can already see that both from the industry as well as the regulators, there has been an uptick in terms of offering of fintech and digital financial services, as well as regulatory actions taken by the regulators in globally, including the region as well as Indonesia. Maybe I'll just skip slide 6 and we go straight to slide 7, where I can share 2-3 examples from other countries in terms of ADB's project. Because ADB's, we have our overall strategy 2030, looking at essentially how to reduce poverty, reduce inequality, and obviously one of the key strategy or one of the key ways of doing this is by increasing access to finance. So in this slide, what you see is a project that ADB supported in the Philippines. We call this cloud-based core banking services, including with, and this is very relevant when you talk about recovery strategy, because when you go to the pandemic, we all understand, we know the impact it has had on MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprises. And in a recent survey that ADB did, one of the, not surprisingly, one of the top challenges or constraints that SMEs are facing is access to finance, access to credit. So this is one of the projects we've done in the Philippines that we're supporting. In this case is the Kantilan Bank, of course, in coordination with the regulator, the Philippine Central Bank, Banco Central, where Kantilan Bank essentially piloted cloud technology in testing its regulatory sandbox. So they migrated the entire core banking system, fully migrated to the cloud. And this offers with this migration and essentially using of not the regular cloud technology, but essentially migrating its core banking services to the cloud, it gives them several benefits. They can reach out to underserved and unbanked population of the Philippines in a more efficient manner, including through customized solution. They can offer clients new opportunities to save funds, to make payments, get small business loan, and they can mitigate various IT strategic and operational risks, as well as reduce major IT capital expenses. So by the banks adopting this sort of innovation, they are able to accelerate and to increase penetration, provide more access to finance to the clients, which obviously includes MSMEs and retail. If we go to the next slide, I'd like to share this example from Papua New Guinea, also another ADB project that we supported. So what is interesting with Papua New Guinea is that this is a country where some 85% of the low-income population reportedly has no access to formal financial services. And the other interesting thing is that access to electricity is also quite low in Papua New Guinea. In this project, which is called Digital Access Tool through Biometric ID, ADB supported the country's Mi Bank as well as Women's Micro Bank to provide financial services to low-income and financially underserved people in remote areas. So the biometric ID allowed people to verify personal attributes such as name, gender, biometrics, and thus access financial services safely and securely. This obviously aids in establishing know your customer information, which we all know is critical to accessing financial services. So we move from KYC to EKYC. What is interesting about this project as well is it uses a smart card on standard Android mobile phones. And what I particularly found very interesting is that this smart card that provides digital access tool works even without electricity and internet. So it's a smart card which is independent of electricity and internet, which is very useful for communities, for rural populations, including Papua New Guinea. So for instance, in Indonesia, we know there's a lot of social assistance programs that is very essential during the recovery period. We know about PKH, conditional cash transfer. We know about Kartu Sembako, the food assistance program, even the voucher of Kartu Prakerja. So all these are, programs, recovery programs that may benefit from similar use of technology. If I can go just quickly to the next slide, this is I'll go very briefly because this is a pilot that we intend to introduce to Indonesia, and it's a very innovative sort of use of technology to connect CPG, such as consumer packaged goods, such as Coca-Cola, P&G, to the small warungs, the MSMEs in certain provinces in Indonesia. What it does is it connects all the way. If you look at the diagram, from the CPG to the wholesaler, the stock, the distributor, all the way to the warung. So it allows the warungs to get discounted prices, promotion. That data gives the PCG, CPG real-time information, real-time data, which enables them to then see, what's the stock like in terms of what's moving and what's not moving, and that improves the data flow all the way through the chain, which benefits the all parties in the transaction. What it also does is it makes the warungs and the MSMEs who are on board and joining this program more visible, because now they have a record transaction digitally. They have they get small amount of credit from the CPGs, and that makes them more visible. And over the medium term, being able to have more access to financial services. If I may just go quickly to the last slide. I just wanted to just share this, and I think earlier Bapak President also mentioned the same thing about balancing opportunities and risk, and this is very important. We know already that a lot of benefits and opportunities through fintech innovation, which can be used during this COVID recovery process. We have technologies, DLT, distributed ledger technology, such as blockchain, and I've seen some proposals being made in Europe about how DLT can be used for social assistance programs. Digital ID can obviously be used for better identification of social assistance programs. But at the same time, we need to be careful as well, because there are potential risks involved with the increased adoption of fintech. So, we've heard earlier even several speakers talking about cybersecurity, legal regulatory challenges, anti-money laundering, even terrorist financing. And one key point to note, I found it very interesting when the president mentioned earlier about digital literacy being around, I think, 35.5%, which is obviously something that needs to be improved. So if we look at it conceptually, fintech, financial innovation has massive potential to increase access to finance. However, if we don't increase this digital literacy, the concern is that a tool, rather a concept that is meant to increase financial inclusion can end up actually excluding more people, because without the literacy, they either will not be part of the ecosystem, will not benefit from the fintech, or even worse, they may be victims of fraud, of malpractices that then has a twofold effect. First, if this happens, then they will obviously not be keen on continuing fintech services. On the other hand, they may even take a step back and say that if you talk about rural population, marginalized communities, they may even say, I'm not interested in financial services because, whatever little money I had I've been a victim of this sort of malpractices. So it's very important as we move forward and we look at recovery using fintech that we take into account digital literacy. I think I'll stop my presentation there, Umang, and happy to answer further questions and discussion with the panel. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sani, for sharing the insights. I think, obviously, I think this pandemic has opened a lot of opportunities, and I think thanks for sharing some very interesting examples and use cases about cloud computing, cloud-based core banking service in Philippines, as well as the eKYC program and the data sharing program. But I think, yeah, the risks are actually very evident, right? I think not just businesses, but I think consumers have to evolve, right? And I think financial literacy is a very important enabler on that, and basically to mitigate that risk. I think the key theme that's really emerging out of the entire discussion, I think till now, is that pandemic has basically accelerated a lot of trends that we were seeing that would have happened in the next 3 to 5 years, and that has just compressed the entire disruption in the last 6 to 9 months, right? I think in that businesses and consumers have to adopt and evolve, and the regulators will also have to keep pace with that change, right? I think, and with that, I think we will definitely see some big opportunities and some industries actually gaining more, and everyone basically will have to adopt in this rapidly changing time. I think with that, I will also open the floor to the audience. If you have any questions for the panel, please enter that in the chat room, and we can take some of them up. I think till the time the questions are coming, right? I think one of the things that I can at least start the discussion is that now, obviously, the whole pace of change has accelerated, right? I think what do the businesses and the regulators have to do differently from what they were doing before in order to cope up with that? Maybe I'll open that up to Mr. William and then on that question.
I think that's a very good question. Thank you. It depends on what kind of businesses you're talking about. I love the opening speech when talking about APIs. For example, in Europe, you have the PSD2 rule now, where governments have made it mandatory for banks to open up all financial data, which has sprung to life completely new businesses, anything to do with data tracking, as well as the commoditization of banking services, as well as insurance, everything in between. So what do banks need to do is I think they look more towards an ecosystem within their own countries as well as abroad. And then when you're talking about smaller companies like SMEs, I think it's very important that they look at the latest trends and see if they can skip a couple of trends in a sense and directly follow where the trend is going instead of now listening what was happening 6 to 8 months ago and really jump on that train and really go for the next big thing that will blow up. Otherwise, they'll might get too many costs in the meantime and need to change it too rapidly, which is not good in a sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's very valid point, and I think I'll also throw this question to Erwin, right? I think obviously Indonesia has been lucky that BI already had a financial blueprint in terms of digitizing payments. So what is BI doing differently in order to support businesses in order to cope up with this pandemic?
Yeah, I think Bill really put forward a different, the very important message from the viewpoint of the low-touch economy, which is things will not be the same again. Right? So even if you can invented the vaccine, I think the fear is still there, right? So yeah. People try to avoid the physical contact. Right? So in that sense, the digital platform will be very crucial in that low-touch economy. So that's the basic theme of the discussion. But then there will be a loser and a winner, right? In that journey, right?
Yeah.
I think we really have to put there in the context of Indonesian economy, where millions of people still unbanked people, and millions of the economic activities run by the SMEs, right? So a lot of them. So I think that's the context. So I think the very important question for us, when those people, the unbanked people, the SMEs, are not really ready in this new economic platform, are they going to be the loser? Right? That's really an important question that we have to ask ourselves. So then, starting with this question, I think we are in the authority trying hard to really answer the question. I think the best answer for that difficult question is really have to prepare everything for those ecosystems of the digital economy take place. So I think that's the first one, and then infrastructure should be there, including the regulation, of course. And also in that context, people really have to be aware on this. I think I would like to give you a story about the KRIS that I've mentioned earlier. So in our view, I'm trying to give you the context why we trying hard to really push the digital payment in the context of the journey of for digital transformation for Indonesia. So in our view, I think the next payment will not be using cash. One will not be using card anymore. Right? So everybody will use their mobile phone, right? So then the QR code will be important, right? So based on that vision, I think it is important for us to have those infrastructure in place where people will use those mobile phones. So we have this standardization of the QR. So I mentioned earlier, only 1 year we have 5.2 million merchants already in the system, right? So with that, I think we can capture the good data in that ecosystem. Right? So we used to pay by cash, but then when, for example, I buy something from the street vendor, and then everything will be finished when I pay them. But when they use the QR code, the standardized QR code, which is the CRIS, then we also can capture the data. So that's the very beginning of the journey for digital transformation. So we can start really simple by using the payment. Then you can do a lot of things from that starting point. So by having all those data, I think you can really use that for the accounting, and even for something really important for Indonesian context, which is the credit scoring, for example. So credit scoring based on the ability of the street merchant people to buy things, right? So now the interest rate for those SMEs is really high because banks really don't know anything about them. So they have to push, they have a risk. By having all those data, they think we really expect that when we have those credit scoring based on those payments, I think the interest rate will be lower. What I'm trying to say here is the digital transformation is a really big thing, but really can start something. And I think again we are lucky that we have those the framework in place. So we would like really we would like to continue all this journey becoming the real story, like I said earlier about the KRI. So if I can summarize the context of Indonesia is really important, which is the unbanked people and SMEs, and then the payment, digital payment can play a big role in this journey.
Thank you, Parvin, for sharing.
Can I just add on that quickly, Umang?
Yes, please, Mr. Sani. Yeah.
Thank you. So I wanted to just supplement what William and Parwan have said. I think Indonesia is quite fortunate because both Bank Indonesia and OJK have done very well during this pandemic, and the response, provided either from BI or OJK in terms of forbearance, in terms of better regulation, the QRI code, have all helped the recovery process and helped the MSMEs. What I like to offer is kind of a framework for a regulator, a policymaker, in terms of response and how you go about with responding to the pandemic. So I like to divide the thinking into two categories: short term and a bit more medium term. In terms of short term, essentially a regulator or policymaker needs to think of nimble regulatory action. How can they come up with regulatory action response in a quick amount of time that includes approval, innovation, without sacrificing consumer protection? And I think gone are the days where we think of regulator on one hand and then industry on the other hand, where regulator is sitting on top of the industry and one is sort of controlling the other. I think in the low touch economy, in the fintech era and as part of the recovery process, there needs to be collaboration between regulators and the industry engagement, because we want it to be a mutually reinforcing relationship and partnership. And once you have the ecosystem between the regulator and the industry, it is also important to share the information through regional platforms, because like what we're doing here, regulators in Indonesia have something to offer regulators in other countries. Similarly, policymakers in other countries may have something to offer regulators and policymakers in Indonesia. So I think in that sense, a multilateral bank like ADB has an important role to play in terms of trying to bring together that knowledge transfer horizontally across country, vertically within the same country, but amongst different regulators. Over the medium term and long term, what regulators should be thinking of is how to transition, how to make the transition from the current state of play into adoption of fintech technology as part of their regulatory and supervision responsibility. And that requires capital investments in terms of infrastructure, as well as human capacity building. So we've heard the term RegTech and SupTech. So regulators should be adopting this as part of their tools for regulatory and supervision, so that they are benefiting from innovation and development in fintech as well. So I think that's what I was thinking in terms of short term and medium term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sani, for sharing that framework for cooperation. I think we have time for one final question from the audience, if there are any questions from the audience.
Maybe in the meantime, if I may add something on
Sure.
capturing that data, you mentioned it's good from a point of view for accounting, and I hear a lot of things about SMEs, and what I want to add for the audience benefit as well is if you're looking at that data by creating those digital payments, also make sure that you take into account what added value that can create for the user or the consumer itself. If we purely look from a business point of view, how can we improve with that data? Then it's going to be very difficult to get those consumers and those users and adopting those new technologies. If they see the benefit in that as well, I'm thinking from budgeting from their side, the access to financial markets, and it could be anything else in between, right? That way, it's often a lot easier to convince the users of your value proposition and to grow as a fintech or a banking company in COVID times.
You. I think I think there is one question regarding blockchain system. I think for Mr. Sani that has come. I think the question is that as we know that there is several countries in Asia have implemented the blockchain product life cycle management. How can BI and ADB help to thrive? Basically, help implement that in Indonesia. Given I think the technologies were expensive, and I think yeah, Mr. Sani, if you would like to answer that.
Sure. You know, to be frank, we've not had a discussion on this yet with BI and OJK. So this is more sort of a brainstorming, initial thinking, if you like, and we're more than happy to have a discussion with BI and OJK after this. So yes, I think the way ADB can contribute to this is obviously, like I said earlier, by sharing information, by looking at regulatory development that is required in terms of blockchain and using DLTs. And, you know, like I mentioned, an interesting example I saw was the use of DLT in social assistance programs. I think those are all interesting developments, and we start with regulatory framework, which obviously BI and OJK is involved in. When it comes to investment for the technology, I mean, that's that's challenging because it's in a way it should be private sector driven. Whilst we think the authorities and the government can provide the regulatory framework, the technology, I think it should be driven by the private sector. They should make the initial investment because that will be the ROI, return on investment for them. So, but certainly ADB can play a role in terms of, if, for instance, we're looking at doing a pilot. I mentioned earlier about the pilot that we intend to do in Indonesia. So we can do a pilot, just sort of initial seed funding to get the ball rolling. But after that, it has to be taken up by the private sector and the industry to make it sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have one. Sorry, yeah, Python, if you have it. Yeah.
At Umang, I think blockchain is a really interesting concept. So the DLT and so on and so forth. So what we have now discussed internally in the bank is the application of DLT in various issues. One of it, of course, people now really talk about the CBDC, central bank digital currency, right? So we are now in our plan to have the CBDC in place, but I think we are preparing ourselves to use those new technology, which is DLT, in solving the payment problems, like something like large value payment system, for example, like RTGS, when you do the transfer and there's a settlement between banks, and it can be done as well by the DLT. So it's basically tokenized, and then by those tokens, then go to the system of DLT, which is peer-to-peer. Probably it can be more efficient. So we are now thinking about it in that context of CBDC. I think the other application is the trade finance. You see, we really still have a problem for the credit for export, for example. Now we have the trade finance using the old LC, so letter of credit, where the documents are so huge there, and back and forth and back and forth. Sometimes it takes about more than a month for saving all those documents alone. By having this DLT, you can really do it in the real time because of those peer-to-peer application, right? So several countries have those DLT solution for the trade financing, we are not thinking about it as well. So we in Bank Indonesia we will have in the early next year we will have the what we call Sandbox 2.0. I think one of the project that we have in mind right now is the application of a DLT in that trade finance. It can help lots, I think, exporters in Indonesia struggling with all those difficulties when they have the trade finance from the banks. So we have talked about it with several banks in the very beginning, just the introduction of the issue, and I think they're really happy to see this going forward. I think some other application also have in our mind, but again, we are really enthusiastic about this application of this new technology.
Thank you, Par. I think that's all the time we had for today. And I think thank you, all the panelists, Erwin, Mr. Sani, Mr. William, for the insightful session and sharing your thoughts with the audience. If I may just end the session, I think with one final comment. I think the world is changing, and I think COVID has really accelerated that pace of change. And I think this is a great time for businesses and regulators to work together to actually create a new world order. I think with that, I would like to end the session and thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much for having
Thank you,
me.
everyone.
Yeah.
Happy
Thank
to be
you.
here. Thank you. Bye.